Pedro from A&P-REACTS. I'm here today with the lovely Katy from Season of Mist. How are you doing?
Well, I mean, I'm back to work, so world's kind of starting to feel a little more normal. So that's exciting. Not that I wasn't working, I just wasn't working in the office. I was home for a few months. So that's been pretty cool.
Last time I saw you was under better circumstances in Toronto.
Under amazing circumstances, we saw 3 live shows in a row. We saw 2 Solstice shows and Cannibal Corpse. Although actually, I don't think you made it to Cannibal Corpse.
No, I didn't make it to Cannibal Corpse,
Yeah.
but I definitely didn't miss those 2 Solstice shows. Thank you for the invite.
Of course, that was an amazing time, and I'm so happy you got to be there to experience it. For those who don't know, last year Solstice, which is a Season of Mist band, they're like this really cool, like I call them like the Icelandic cowboys. Like they have this like rock sound that's like kind of twangy, but also dark and folky, but also very atmospheric. It's very, very original. I don't really have anything that I could kind of compare it to,
Yeah.
but Taste of Iceland, which is this huge festival that celebrates Icelandic culture, everything, food, music, movies, you name it, invited Solstafir, as well as this other band, Kaelin Mikla, which is like this really cool, like dark wave band, also from Iceland, to represent the musical aspect. So we invited Pedro because he's been such an awesome supporter of the label. He's done so much awesome work for us, and we invited him to come out as one of the press people to experience it during both our private event that we had, as well as the public event, which was actually sold out. You would have thought it was a Velvet Rope Club because there were just people lined up outside.
Yeah, the lineup was crazy.
Yeah,
it was crazy. It's funny that you define the band like that cowboy thing. Is the first, I don't know if I've ever told you this story. The first time I saw the band, they were touring with Paradise Lost a couple of years ago. I think it was 2018. They did a tour with Paradise Lost in North America.
October 2018, yes.
Yeah. So I admit I had never heard of them before, and I had never seen them before. So I'm in the front row. These guys come on stage with cowboy boots and cowboy hat. I was like, what's happening here? Am I at the wrong show? Like, did I enter the wrong venue? Like, is it like Tim McGraw coming at some point in time during this performance? I was completely blown away by the way they looked. And then when they start playing, I'm like, what the hell? Like, now the sound does not match the outfit. It's like, the drapes don't match the curtains kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like, I was like, what's happening here? It was such a strange experience. But since then, I became a huge fan. What an incredible live band.
They really are. Like, this is something that I think I really actually started to be able to articulate once I finally got to see them live. Is just that when a band can play live and a band could put out a song and you don't understand the words because it's in a different language, but you still connect with the music and have like an emotional response. Like that's not something a lot of bands can do. And Solstafir is that kind of band that does that. And I think that's what makes them so special. And I'm very excited. I mean, it's not news really that they have been in the studio. We have a new album coming. That's really about all I can say. But I already heard some of the music from it. And you're not going to be disappointed if you're a Solstafir fan. If you're not, I definitely, not just because I work at the label. I was a fan of this band before I even came to the label, I promise. I definitely recommend checking them out because they are a special band.
Yeah, and super nice guys. I got to meet the guys after the first show, that private event, and super nice guys. And I'll never forget the Rotundo joke that they said. Which by the way, next time they come to town, I'm definitely going to be there with a sign. Rotundo loves you. I'm definitely.
Welcome to Rotundo.
I'm definitely doing it. But I want to ask you a little bit about the work that you do. And the first question that I have for you is, what background do you have, and how did you get involved with PR and in the music industry in general?
Well, I hope we have a lot of time because there's a lot of detail there. So basically, I've always been passionate about music, and I've also always been very passionate about writing. And I guess originally I really just saw myself as a music journalist. So my senior year of high school, I started writing for the school newspaper, and I had a really amazing teacher who really believed in me, and he kind of knew I was a little lost. I didn't really know what I was going to do after high school, but he recognized in me that I love music and I love writing. And he just said to me, you should apply for an internship. So I went that day. We had a Coconuts record store, for people who are familiar with that. Remember record stores? And literally down the block from my house. And I went there and I picked up all my favorite metal magazines. And I wrote to them and I just said, you know, hey, and the one that I actually wrote to was Metal Edge, because it actually had their address and everything. And I wrote to them and I said, hey, you know, are you looking for an intern? Here's some writing samples in my school paper. My teacher that I told you about helped me write my resume. And like a month later, it's all snail mail, by the way. This is how long. This is in 2007. So it was all, or this actually is 2006. And it was all snail mail. So a month later, a letter comes and they were like, yeah, you know, we are actually come in for an interview. And I worked with Rosa Henriquez, who was the one of the editors at the time, and Kat Santiago. And they both were amazing. It was also really cool just to be somewhere with like two women, you know, and have that as my intro. They were really like real mentors to me. But things started to change. Kat left. Rosa was focusing more on school, and there was just a lot of changes. And I also at the same time just started college. So I also started EMT school because I was also pursuing a career as a medic and as an emergency medical technician. So I just had a lot going on, and I kind of just slowly phased out of it, which was a mistake in some ways, because I think I still would have been on the same trajectory if I just skipped college and just stuck with that. But at the same time, I think I needed to do what I needed to do. Worked as an EMT for a very short time before I realized, oh yeah, no, I hate this. This is very emotionally challenging. And I give a lot of credit to any healthcare worker, especially now more than ever, because you have to be a real special kind of person to do that. And it's not for everyone. And, you know, I really acknowledge that. So it wasn't for me. And again, I just felt lost and I just wanted to go back to music. So at that point, did the same thing. I'm like, where do I want to go? Sent emails at this point. This is now like 2010.
Yeah, things evolved a little bit from the snail mail.
Yeah, things evolved. So sending emails and filling out contact forms. And the first and only place that got back to me was SiriusXM. And interestingly enough, they wanted me to be on doctor radio because of my experience in medicine. And I was like, not really. I kind of want to get away from that. I was thinking something else. So they offered me this LGBTQ show, Derek and Romaine. And they were like, oh, this show could sometimes be a little crude and maybe, you know, not for everyone. But yeah, that one, I want that one. You know, like I want the one where they're going to be like, you know, just really like sexy and fun. And I had a great time and I had amazing mentors. And who do I see one night working in the studio around the corner? Eddie Trunk. So I kind of like froze and didn't like know what to say to him. So instead I just did the most awkward, nerdy thing and just sent him a tweet like, hey, I just saw Eddie Trunk at SiriusXM. I'm afraid to say hi. And he tweeted me back. He goes, never be afraid to say hi. Always happy to meet, you know, whoever. So I kind of talked to some people about like, how do I work with him? Like when I'm done with this internship, because I really want to. So you're like, you know, just offer him help one day. So one day he needed help. I happened to notice the person that was working for him wasn't there and that his phones were going crazy and he was on the air. I just stood there waiting till the on air button went off. And it was just complete also like synchronicity because I happened to have that night off from the internship because we had a pre-recorded show for whatever reason. And I just barged in and I said, hey, I noticed the person works for you isn't here. Do you need help? I said, yes, thank you. Billy Sheehan was the guest. I met him. Eddie had Billy Sheehan sign his guitar that night. It was just magical. And then a few months later, he just asked me to come on board and start working with him. And then through him, he opened up a lot of opportunities. I started working in radio promotion with Skateboard Marketing, who's done every like Nuclear Blast record and a lot of like just you name Napalm stuff, like you name a record and chances are or name a band, chances are they've worked with them. So from there and through Eddie, I then got a job at a different record label. That didn't quite work out. I'm not going to get into that. You could honestly probably just Google it. But anyway, after that, I went to my first PR job. I kind of was there and it was really my first industry job outside of radio and outside of journalism where I started learning marketing and I started working some PR, not really directly, just more indirectly assisting the person that was doing PR for the label. And I kind of started thinking about it. It's like, I think I could see myself doing this. So I started looking for a job and I interviewed for a couple of PR places. And it's pretty interesting because one of the people I interviewed for, Jamie Roberts, even though I didn't get hired to stay, she's also a good friend and has helped me throughout the years. So kind of just goes to show you what a great industry this is and the camaraderie and people looking out for each other. And I ended up getting my first full-time publicity job at Adrenaline PR. And I was working with the bands that I grew up obsessed with, that I still am, Testament, Exodus. Like, it was crazy that I was just working with these bands that I love so much and never in a million years would have dreamed of working with. And I was there for about a year. And then, it didn't really work out. And I ended up going freelance with Freeman Promotions, doing radio, doing promo with him. We worked with bands like, well, he still does, works with bands with Guar and basically everything on like Napalm and SPV, Frontiers, like whole range of really cool stuff. And then Spine Farm was another one we worked. And interestingly enough, we worked some Season of Mist bands like Naive Liviscaris, which I love that band. And that was definitely a project that we both, I think, had a lot of passion for and really were able to.
I think sorry to interrupt you, but I think at the time he was also working with Rotting Christ, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, interestingly enough, right before I even knew that Season of Mist was hiring, we had just been hired to work Rotting Christ, Hate Eternal, and I think Beyond Creation. I'm pretty sure those are the only three. So I actually happened to be already working Season of Mist records before they even posted that a job was open, which was pretty cool. But prior to all of that, we were working Naive Liviscaris. At least that was the first project of theirs that I had worked. And I also, at that time, since I was freelance, I had a little more availability and I went back into writing. For a year, I was a web editor of Revolver Magazine. And then that ended up turning into, once they revamped, producing their podcasts. So I did that for a while as well. And everything kind of came full circle where Derek and Romaine, the show I'd been working on, my very first show I interned on at Sirius, started their own radio company and reached out to me and offered me a job as a producer. So it's Derek and Romaine Radio. It's an internet radio. They built it entirely themselves. It was great because there was a lot of Sirius XM alumni there that I was working with, which was just fantastic. So that year, or 3 years, I guess, it was between 2016, 2016 to 18. It's like 2 years. I was freelance entirely. And I kind of was just in a weird place where I'm like, all right, I'm freelance, but I kind of feel like the only way I'm going to make more money is if I pick up more work, which I just physically can't do. All the while, I'm also still working with Eddie Trunk, producing his podcast. Like, I'm all over the place, And this job happened to just come up at the right time. I also needed to move. The landlord was selling our property that I lived on in New York. So this opportunity came to move to a new city and to work for a label that not only did I have a lot of bands from that label that I really loved, but also that I'd worked with before and had a very positive experience with. So everything kind of worked out. And it's crazy because you look at the journey and nothing was a straight line, but I think all along PR was where I was supposed to be. And I still love radio. I contribute right now to Loudwire. Once in a blue, I'll do something for Metal Insider, which is a little tricky when you're a publicist to kind of navigate both. But I think what's great is there's a lot of understanding and a lot of neutrality. And I try to be as neutral as possible and not only focus on my bands, unless obviously say it's a collection of bands for something, but I won't review one of my bands or interview one of my bands for one of those,
Makes sense.
Yeah. So, so that's where I'm at now. So it's just been a crazy journey. And I think I'm finally now like, all right, I'm at my destination now.
You reach final destination. Well, maybe not final, but at least final.
It sounds dark.
We met when you were still working with John Freeman. That's how we started. That's how I met you in terms of exchange of emails and things like that. And then it was really interesting because I stopped getting emails from you as far as John was concerned. And then I got an email from you from Season of Mist. And I was like, oh, this name is familiar, but not with this email address. And then it was like, oh, I guess she changed jobs. That explains why I wasn't getting any emails from you from his stuff, from the bands that he was working with. So that was really interesting. It just shows you how it's a big world, but it's a small world within this big world where everybody really knows each other from different PR firms and from different labels.
It really is. And you'd be surprised, like, obviously, from a business standpoint, there's always going to be a competitor. There's always going to be in a consumption way, but we never treat each other like that. You know, in this industry, you'd be amazed how many publicists from different labels will get together and hang out, or how many, you know, people from labels just intermingle. Like, we're all friends. And that's what I think, again, is just really cool, and what's made working in this industry so special. And it just feels there's just a lot of camaraderie, and, you know, people look out for each other. No one's saying, oh, well, you work for a competing label, so screw you. It's just like, cool, you know what? You work for a competing label. It doesn't mean we can't be friends. Doesn't mean we can't, you know, exchange tips, and I'll help better each other and grow each other. And that's been honestly one of the most rewarding things.
Yeah, I agree with you. That was one of the misconceptions that I had about the music business. I thought like Season of Mist guys hated Napalm Records guys, or, you know what I mean? Like, there was this internal rivalry and people fighting and throwing stones at each other and whatever. And then once I start meeting all of you guys behind the scenes, I realized that everybody knows everybody. Everybody's super friendly with everybody. Everybody listens to each other's bands, you know what I mean, and buys each other's merch and albums and whatever else, and goes to shows and everything. And that to me was such a breath of fresh air, to see that regardless of what label you represent, at the end of the day, there's one ecosystem that feeds everybody, right? So we got to take care of that ecosystem in order for all of us to be able to survive within it.
Exactly. And that's what we have. And it could absolutely easily go the other way. Who knows what it was like years ago, but even just that Solstafir show, you know, we had the one in Toronto. We also had 2 in New York, and one, well, technically 2 in Seattle. One was more like a recorded thing, but there was technically performances. And in New York, we had people from Napalm there. We had people from Spine Farm there. You know, we invited everyone because these people are our friends. And it's like, hey, come out, see some good music, hang out. You know, there's just, it's not, there's just a lot of there's a real tightness in this industry that I think, like you said, a lot of people may not realize, because they just think, oh, these labels must hate each other. It's like, no, we're cool, you know? We've all been through the same shit. Like, no one can relate to another publicist like another publicist. You know what I'm saying? Like, we have to have each other's backs.
Yeah, I see that. I totally see that. If somebody approached you and they're fresh out of college and they want to get into the PR business, working for a label or even for a private company, what would be the advice that you would give that person?
Well, network for sure. You know, go out there, go to shows. Don't be afraid. You see someone you know, you recognize from Twitter, whether it's a journalist, whether it's a publicist, a label personnel, whoever it is, go up, introduce yourself. Don't be punishing though, you know, because we don't like that either. Don't be up in our faces, but introduce yourself, buy a drink, give a card, make an impression. But again, you know, keep the brakes on. Don't be like a fanboy, fangirl kind of thing, because we've had that happen. I've definitely been approached where I'm like, oh, like, I'm a little overwhelmed here, man. Personal space, you know, or okay, like, it's been cool talking to you for the past 10 minutes, but a band is on, I want to see, you know. So that kind of stuff, but still at the same time, have that confidence to make introductions, and at the same time, grow yourself, you know, start your own blog where you can start growing your name and growing your brand. And look, it's not easy, because bloggers, podcasters, we're all a dime a dozen, really. You just got to make yourself stand out, and do that in a way that, you know, that's true to you, and also in a way that people are going to definitely take notice and say, oh, you know what, we're looking for some work. And put yourself out there, like what I did with Eddie Trump. Just hit someone up one day. Hey, you guys looking for writers? And the biggest thing, and I think this is what I see a lot, that I think a lot of people coming out of college don't expect, is in the beginning, you're going to have to whore yourself for no money. Like, hey, you want me to write this, like, you know, 5,000 word piece for nothing? I will. Because that shows some dedication. Obviously, there's a limit to what you're going to want to do. You don't want to get taken advantage of, but you definitely want to show that you're passionate, because that's also how I got noticed. You know, working these internships, you're not getting paid, but I was still on time every day. I still, you know, and eventually that led to a job with Sirius, and eventually that led to more with Eddie Trump. And, you know, you got to prove yourself responsibly as well.
And also build a little bit of a portfolio, right? It's going to be hard for you to get a paying job writing for a magazine if you have no writing experience with nobody else up until that point, right? So if you have to do a few free jobs here and there in order to build that portfolio, I think that it will perhaps pay you off in the long run. I think you have to look at the big picture, not short-term gains.
Exactly. That's definitely a big part of it. And there's a lot of blogs out there you'd be surprised that will pay. And again, it might not seem like much, but I'm not going to blow up who does and who doesn't, because I think that's a little too personal. But you know what? Just go out there, put yourself out there. It's a blog you read every day, no matter how big or small. Just throw yourself out there, find a contact and do it yourself, because that shows tenacity. You know, don't go, oh, let me ask this other person to help me. Show initiative, show tenacity, and show I'm capable. I could do this. I'm going to find this contact. I'm going to write them. I'm going to introduce myself. And, you know, just like I said, prove you're responsible, you're professional, and that you have something that they could take notice, whether it's a certain way you write, or even visually, if you're a photographer, the way you present your website. All these little details can go a long way.
You talked about people approaching you, buying you a drink, and start building that network. How many times do people give you demo tapes, or people tell you, you know, can I send you some music? My band is amazing. You guys should really listen to it. How often does that happen?
More often, actually, probably as often as you could imagine.
Very often.
I think, though, what's kind of interesting is it doesn't happen so much in person. I mean, not to say that it doesn't, but it's rare that I'll be at a show and someone will come up to me and be like, hey, and handing me a physical CD. But there's definitely people who I've never met in my life who will add me on Facebook, and within 5 seconds are sending me a link to their SoundCloud. So that happens pretty frequently. But it's also different if you reach out to me via my work email, because now I know you're serious versus someone who's just like, I'm going to add this person on Facebook, probably along with like 50 other people, and just throw it all to the wall and see what sticks, and not make any formal introduction and just be like, do this thing for me, versus making a professional introduction and emailing me at a professional time in a professional space. So that can make all the difference. And look, I give people credit. I'm not going to lie. I definitely skip through a lot of this. I'm not interested unless there's something that pops out at me that makes me say, actually, I might dig this band. But again, it just comes down to being professional, how you present yourself, and how you make your project memorable.
Of all the bands that you've worked with and all the different jobs, I mean, I lost count of how many different jobs you've either had or still have.
Same. You sound like my parents.
Your resume is like the Bible. I'm sure you when you go for if you go for a job interview, it's like an encyclopedia of different jobs you've had, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But amongst all these jobs that you've had and all the bands that you've worked with, has there ever been a band that you had a preconceived idea of either being like this great guys, and then when you met them, and you don't have to name the band, but then you met them and they were like, oh my God, what a bunch of douches? Or has it been the other way around, where you thought they were kind of like dicks, and then when you met them, they're like the greatest people ever?
Definitely been instances on both ends. And I think, I mean, for the most part, I never make an assumption, but there's times when you hear about someone who has a notorious reputation, whether that usually, you know, it's a reputation where, oh, this person's an asshole, blah, blah, blah. And believe it or not, 9 times out of 10, I meet those people and yeah, they are. But there's also been times where I've heard those rumors about people and I've met them and they were nothing but polite and awesome to me. And there's some of these people that people will say these things about who I consider good friends because they've always treated me with respect and always been, you know, had my back. So I try not to go on preconceived notions. So I can't necessarily, but I definitely think there's times when I do, you know, hear something about someone and then, or have my own. There's definitely been instances where I've had my own personal experiences with people and then had a different professional experience with them as well.
So you got to see both sides of the coin, if you will.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
You got to see them with the mask on, and then you got to see them with the mask off.
Right. Or not even that. I think people compartmentalize, you know, like you and I could hang out. Yeah, you know, we could hang out, have a beer and talk music, but you know, when it comes to professionalism in your brand, we might not see eye to eye or whatever it is. So I try not to really make that bleed into a personal relationship, because again, it's different when you're handling someone else's vision and project and livelihood, as well as my own, which is my career and as a PR person. But at the same time, if it's someone who I've hung out with a million times and had a great time with, it's like, all right, it's just a different, I wouldn't say it's being fake. I just think people compartmentalize the different parts of their lives and take some things more personally than others.
Of all the things that you've done with Season of Mist and now the time that you've been with the label, what is one of the highlights for you of all the things that you've done with the label so far?
I've had a few. I mean, definitely that Soul Sphere thing we spoke about. That was an incredible experience that, you know, we got to have. I think on top of that, for me, prior to this being a publicist, I mainly did tour press. which is basically, inviting people to concerts. So coming to Season of Mist, in a year's time, I got 2 cover stories for 2 different artists, one for a bop at Decibel Magazine, and a very recent one that's actually out now with Abysmal Dawn with New Noise. So those are big milestone moments for me in my career. And on top of that, it's also just opened up some doors for me where certain people I've worked with also work or very heavily involved in the Norwegian festival scene. So that's allowed me to go out there and also kind of make some really great connections, really great friendships, and experience something that I never would have been able to experience if it wasn't for this career and this job and the gateway it paved for me.
Yeah, I think it's definitely given you an opportunity to branch out and go and see places and do things, perhaps even more than the bands that are touring themselves, because at least you have a little bit more time to go enjoy the city. Like when you were in Toronto, I'm sure you had a little bit more time than even Solsafir did, because that's the other thing. People don't realize how hectic the schedules are. Like these bands only see 2 things: the back of the bus and the venue. That's pretty much it when you're on the road.
It's very true. It's very true. And, it's why too, if you're a fan, I always hear stories. Sometimes you'll hear mixed stories from fans. Like, oh, I met this person and they were a dick. And then someone else say, well, really, because they were cool. It's timing sometimes. You see someone before a show, maybe don't approach them because they're right now maybe on their only 15-minute break they have between load-in and sound check. But after a show, it's late, it's everything's broken down. Sure, they're probably now in party and chill mode. So there's definitely a lot of stress and a lot of pressure that comes to putting these events together, especially tours, festivals, and even things like we did, when we went to Toronto and did this thing with Solstafir.
Yeah, a lot of the times, I mean, even myself before, I didn't realize how much work went even before one show. I'm not even talking about the whole tour, but just one show. And now that sometimes I show up early either to hang out with the guys from the bands because they're my friends or to do an interview and whatnot. And you get there, the show's not until 7. We get there at 1 and the work is already starting, setting up everything, sound checks, everything, moving everything in and out. It's a lot of work that goes into just setting up one night, one venue, one show. And now imagine doing that for 30 days straight across the country on a tour. You really have to give the band sometimes a little bit of space and understanding where they're coming from. You know what I mean? When you have those perhaps less positive interactions.
Definitely. That's very true. And I mean, I've seen it. I've been there for Guar load-in and setup, and that is like an all-day event sometimes. So there's a lot involved in a lot of these shows. And sometimes you'd even be surprised. A band you may not think that they have so much maybe need a longer sound check because there's something, they have something that's more involved, or they can't use someone else's amp and can't have those presets. Like there's just little like nuances like that can really occupy a lot of time and a lot of space as well. Just a lot of mental space and energy.
Well, you mentioned gore. There's a lot of blood bags that you have to prepare before the show. And there's all sorts of stuff happening. I went to see them when with John. John was in town, and we went to the War show, and it was such a eye-opening experience to be there from like I think we got there at noon and just see them preparing all the blood stuff, everything getting set up, and wow, like the amount of work was just absolutely unbelievable. Just for like an hour and 20-minute set or like an hour set, it's unreal the amount of work that goes on into something like that.
It really is. It really is. So just always keep that in the back of your mind as a fan, or even just as a person in the music industry, because there's definitely sometimes people who overstep their boundaries and don't realize, oh, I'm here early for an interview, or oh, the band's running late for an interview, and they don't understand. Well, yeah, the band's running late because they had a malfunction, or whatever it is that is putting them behind. They're not blowing you off. They're dealing with a crisis most likely.
Yeah, exactly. It's like when you have an interview set up for like 9 o'clock on a Friday, and then the person doesn't show up to Skype because they fall asleep. You know what I mean? Like that kind of stuff happens. And then you set it up for a different date, and then they don't show up again, and it's like and it keeps like happening. But you always understand that. Listen, life doesn't stop for anybody. This is the way it is, and you just have to forgive and forget and move on with your life.
Yes, and I'm sorry.
I had to throw a jab in there. Come on, I had to throw a jab in there.
I knew you were going to bust my balls about it. Yes, everyone. I did exactly to Pedro what I yell at other people for doing. I'm the hypocrite.
I was like, where is she? I mean, like, she's really late. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to give her 30 minutes. And I was like, okay, 30 minutes. Should I give her 45 minutes? Because I'm a nice guy. Like, I was like, I see your green is on. I'm like, she's on. So she must be busy with something. Maybe her cat got sick or something. So I was really concerned. Turns out you just.
That. Listen, I'm adapting to the world right now. It's so growling pain.
I was like, I hope she's okay. I hope she's not like something happened to her. Somebody touch her in the park, rub one of her arms or her tattoos or something like that. I was like, all these stories are going through my mind at that time. And I was like, oh my God, I hope she's all right. We can't lose Katy. We can't afford to lose her. Like, I hope everything is fine. I'm just glad everything is fine.
Thank you. Nope, I'm just an asshole.
Well, one of the things I forgot to ask you when we were talking about the demo tapes is, in your opinion, what's the best way for an unsigned young band that wants to get some attention? What's the best way for them to reach a label? Or is there something they need to do even before they try to reach out to a label?
Really two ways. I mean, first of all, just have your shit together. Don't have 3 songs loosely written, recorded in a basement, which, look, not saying that basement recordings don't fly, because this whole industry is basically based on that when you look at the history. But get your shit together. Make sure you have something complete. Make sure you have something rehearsed. Make sure you're ready to deal with the business side, because there's a lot of people who I think don't realize, they think, oh, I have a label, I don't have to do anything. And they don't realize, no, I don't have a label, you actually have more that you need to do. Like, in some ways, yes, there's less things you have to worry about, like, for instance, marketing and promotions, but there's other nuances that you have to deal with on the business end. So be prepared for that. And it doesn't have to be the whole band, as long as there's one of you, like, group project status, like one of you that is willing to handle it and be the adult and be the liaison, then, like, great. You need to be prepared for that. So that's like number one. But the 2 best ways to approach a label, or to get noticed rather, is follow directions. Don't just send a cold email. Don't just send it to whatever email address you happen to just find on Google. Every website has, every single label website, and if you can't find the website, probably on the Facebook, a submission, like a guidelines for submission, usually a contact form for submission. There's usually a way that you can specifically submit. And that's what you need to do. And you need to follow those directions, because that can make all the difference between them saying, I want to sign this band. Like, your band can be great, but if you can't follow the directions, that could make all the difference between even me listening to it versus me deleting it. Because we get so much stuff. And this goes back to, again, with making yourself stand out. Professionalism is the biggest way you could do that. And following directions and showing us you're competent, you're ready to be on a label, because, like I said, that is it's a very demanding move in a lot of ways. There's still a lot that needs to be done. It's not like, great, we have a label, we could just play music. There's a lot of business. Some people have managers, so they can circumvent that, but chances are, if you're a small developing band, you don't have that either. So you need to kind of handle yourself and be there. But the other way to do it, without submitting a demo, and believe it or not, a couple of the bands that we've signed on our label got signed this way, open for someone. Start playing shows, whether it's a local show, because we travel, and there's people, you might be surprised, labels that have people who work remotely. So maybe you're in Cleveland, Ohio. I mean, that's where Hell's Headbangers is. And you happen to just play some local basement show. Maybe you could be discovered that way. So play shows, play every show, no matter how big or how small. Kind of goes back to what I was saying before about working in the beginning, where you kind of got to eat some shit and you kind of got to take some cuts. Play every show you can within reason. At the same time, don't be quitting your job, because let's face it, that's really taking a risk with music, especially now. But yeah, just play shows, because you never know who's going to be there, and play every show, no matter how many people are there, like you're at Vakken.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think, tell me what you think about this. Sometimes when I meet bands that are unsigned, they have a lot of talent, they have a lot of potential, but I almost feel like they're kind of pregnant. And there's no such thing as kind of pregnant. Either you're pregnant or you're not. So it's like they don't want to do the work, but they want to be on a label and have the touring and all of the. I don't think they realize the full amount of work that goes into, like you said, being on a label, releasing a record, and then everything that goes along with it. So sometimes I don't feel like that they want to be serious about it, but they don't want to put the serious work into it. Do you agree with that?
I definitely do. And, look, I get there's always growing pains in the beginning, but sometimes it's when you deal with more seasoned bands like that, where it's a little more like you should know but better by now. But at the same time, again, you need to like people, I think in the beginning, that's really what can make or break an artist where they just realize, oh, I need to really like do stuff. I think a lot of people just want that instant gratification and don't realize the amount of work they need to put in.
Yeah, I think that's one of the issues. It's not really understanding the forest from the trees. You know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
they just don't understand the business side of things. And there's just, oh, I just want to play. I just want to play shows. Okay, yeah, that's fine. But you have to understand, in my opinion, I think you have to have a roadmap. You want to just do this for fun on the weekend with your friends and just play a gig here and there because that's fun to do and you're enjoying yourself, or you want to take the next step and you want to be like a full-time musician or as close to being a full-time musician as possible. And I think some bands are kind of caught in that limbo in between those two worlds.
Definitely. Definitely. And it's interesting because I think this conversation comes up a lot where there's some bands who are just artists, and that's totally fine, but they're very ill-equipped for the business side. So, and there's a lot of bands that you look at that are just business. For example, Kiss. I mean, it's no secret that band is not a band, it's a business. So yeah, you definitely have. And then of course there's just that struggle of trying to balance. And there's people who absolutely can juggle it and really have it down. And fortunately that seems to be the case for the most part. But it's definitely a fine line to walk for some.
All the years that you've been doing PR and looking back now at all the lessons learned, all the things you did wrong, all the things you did right, if you could go back to your young self finishing college, sending those snail mail letters to all those magazines, what would you tell young Katy at that point for you to do that you didn't know you had to do?
The biggest thing for me, don't go to college, because I studied something that I do not use at all. I mean, in a way, maybe I studied psych and sociology, so you definitely need a little bit of that experience working in this industry. But I ended up just wasting my time and wasting my money. And like I said, I mean, I think it's what I had to do and would have done regardless if Katy from the future could have told Katy from the future then. But I really think I could be exactly where I am today. Maybe could have even been in this position sooner had I really stuck with my internship and rode that out instead of going to college. And even the EMT thing, I'm very glad I did, and it would never deter myself from doing it because it's another thing I really need to try and find out. But I never really wanted to go to college, and I always kind of knew deep down that music is what I wanted to pursue. Like I just remember sitting in classes in college and suffering and sitting there and sneaking my phone and looking at what was going on Metal Injection and Blabbermouth and seeing what my favorite bands were up to. And like, I remember sitting there and thinking like, can I just get a job where I can just listen to metal all day and like not have to ever do math again, which I still have to do a lot of math, which is surprising, but mostly having to do with converting things from the imperial system to the metric system, because that's a struggle of working at an international label as an American. But I'm glad that that's really the only thing I changed. As far as everything else in my career, I think everything played out as it needed to for me to end up here.
I have one more question for you, and I saved perhaps the best for last. And I want to hear all the details about what I'm going to ask you. How was it meeting King Diamond?
Oh my God, amazing. My heart just started thinking about it.
I'm so jealous.
Oh, I know. Well, in all fairness, it was the second time I met him, but the first time was a very, very brief encounter. It was at a show he played at whatever it's called now, Best Buy Theater, PlayStation Theater. I think it doesn't even exist anymore in Times Square, New York. And Brian Slagle had hooked me up with passes to go backstage, which was very nice of him. He's also just another friend who's just looked out for me for, a long time in this industry. And King Diamond happened to be backstage, no makeup. He was there with his wife, Livia, who I've actually formed a friendship with, which is kind of crazy to me. And I just like said hi to him and shook his hand and then just didn't know what to say. I just like, And it's hard for me to be starstruck because I'm so jaded, but that was definitely one of those moments. I think the only other moment like that I had was Rob Halford and Slash. Um, so it takes a lot for me to get in that way. So it was just a brief encounter that it wasn't super impactful. It was really actually kind of more embarrassing. So recently I went to see King Diamond at someplace, what was it? The Tower Theater here in Philadelphia. And I had two really amazing friends, a friend of mine, Randy, who works at NECA Toys, which I have a collection of over here behind me, as well as my friend Susanna. Both, Randy thought, oh, maybe his pass would work to get me back. It didn't. And then as I was walking away, my friend Susanna had an extra pass and was like, here you go. And I was like, oh my God, this is happening. This was never the plan. I have amazing friends. And like I said, this industry, we just look out for each other. And it's just amazing that people would do that for me. Like, what have I done? So it was just amazing. And I had a conversation with King Diamond. And I think the most heartbreaking part of all of that was, as we were talking, he confided in us about the plans for 2020, because this was last year.
Yeah, I was not sure.
He told me that Merciful Fate was going to be playing this festival in Bergen, Norway. I said to him, Beyond the Gates? Yeah, I was going to that. I was going to see Merciful Fate this year, Beyond the Gates Festival.
Oh.
But instead, I'll just probably be home crying in my underwear, eating ice cream. So.
I feel your pain. I end up buying the live DVD because, like, that's the closest I can get this year from seeing King Diamond perform live. And now looking back last year when he was touring, he didn't play in Toronto. He played in Montreal. That's the closest that he played. But it was on a Tuesday. It was really hard for me. I mean, for those that don't know, Montreal from Toronto, it's like a 7 hour drive.
No, that's insane. You can't do that.
And to fly, it's not like in the US where flying is super cheap. For me to fly from here to Montreal is around like 300, 350. So it gets expensive, for me to go there just for a show and come back. And so I didn't make any plans. My son has guitar lessons on a Tuesday. I think it was a Tuesday. And I also, I believe, was going to a show, and I had an interview schedule. There was a bunch of stuff happening because I was like, there's no way I'm going to go to Montreal. It's just not going to happen. Then that morning, I got a message from Pete from Insiferum, and he's like, hey, dude, I'm in Montreal. I have some extra passes. Do you want to come up and meet up with me and go see King Diamond? And I was like, dude, I can't. Like, I already made all these other plans. I like, if you told me like 2 days before, I could have like rearranged my schedule, work something out. It's just too short notice. Like, he goes, oh yeah, but you're in Canada. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm like 6-hour drive away. It's not like I can just hop in my car and go. Now looking back, what a mistake. If I knew there was this freaking coronavirus was going to happen, I would have done it. I would have slept in the car if I had to.
Nobody knew, man. And I feel you on that. I look back and there were so many nights I went to shows and left before the end of the night and didn't hang around, or shows that I was just like, you know what? I'm so tired. I'm just not going to go. And now I regret it so much that I was just such a party pooper. Like, now I'm just like, what the hell? And honestly, I say that now, but you know what? I want everyone to remember that when you see me at a show, when that shows finally happen again, and it's 9 p.m. and I'm crying that I'm tired and want to go.
You know what? I honestly make that conscious effort all the time because I remember Motorhead was playing in Oshawa. Oshawa is maybe about an hour from where I live. And this was October, I believe. And I was like, I don't want to. Oshawa is really like the pits. Like it's you don't want to go there unless you have to go there. And even before COVID, you should wear a mask and gloves if you go there. Do you know what I mean?
No.
Like, I just didn't want to go there. So I was like, you know what? Next time Motorhead is in Toronto, I'll go see them. And then let me pass away 2 months later. So from that day on, I said, I'll never do that again. If there's a band that comes to Toronto, or at least within reasonable driving distance from Toronto, I'm not going to miss any show. Like, I think last year I went to like over 120 shows because I was like, I'm not missing. I don't care how tired I am. I remember, I hope my boss is not watching this, but I took days off, sick days, because of so many shows in a row. I was like, I'm exhausted. Like, after the third night in a row of coming home like at 4 o'clock in the morning, I was like, okay, there's no way I can go to work. I need to take a day off.
See, I don't have that luxury because my boss knows that. They're usually there with me.
Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, man, you know, I actually kind of had a similar Lemmy thing where my like one again, Lemmy's another one like King Diamond to me, where it's just, you know, I'm a huge Motorhead fan, and I just love Lemmy, and I never got to meet him. I've seen Motorhead live plenty of times, but I just never got to meet him. And he had his birthday party, you know, right before he died. He had it at the Rainbow in LA. And even though it was a private party, I knew everyone going, and I knew I could have gotten in. And I even toyed with the idea with some people, and they were like, absolutely, you could be my plus. If you could get out here, you could be my +1 or whatever it was. So I knew I could get in. I knew I could go. And I didn't really have the days off from work. So I you know, couldn't really, I wasn't going to make money if I had taken off. But the other part of me was just like, I should just do it. And flights were cheap at the time, you know, round trip from like JFK to LAX. Sometimes you could get really, really cheap. And I just didn't do it. And the biggest regret was not just seizing the moment and saying, fuck it, I'll figure out money another time. I don't care. Like, you know, and I just wish I had gone because I didn't know, you know, I think I kind of did in a way know, but I don't know. I guess I didn't, I was in denial, I think is really more the proper
Yeah,
way.
I think you were. I had that same feeling. It's like, you know, that perhaps you're blowing one of the biggest opportunities, but at the same time, in the back of your mind is like, you're thinking there's got to be another one around the corner. So,
Right.
but sometimes there isn't. So it's better the one you have than the one that you could possibly get. And that's kind of the lesson that I took from that whole experience. But when I saw the pictures of you with King Diamond, I was super jealous. I hated you so much. I was like, oh my God, King Diamond. Like, I mean, I think my voice would go at the King Diamond range if I met him in person. I would be a total fangirl that, King Diamond, you know, like, I'd be like,
Do you know how hard it was to keep my cool? Like I had to like mentally, like I just saw him walk in and like my heart just sank, and I was just like, I just meant I gotta be cool. And like I'm just like really like I held it together. It wasn't like the first time where I was just like, like just a bumbling idiot, you know, but yeah, and the same thing like with Halford. The first time I met Halford, I was definitely just like, what do I say? What do I do? And it was a particularly shocking moment because he had just had spinal surgery or was about to, and nobody really knew this yet. It hadn't been public knowledge at the time. I mean, it was after the fact, but it wasn't. So he shows up in a wheelchair, and I'm like, here's my idol in a wheelchair. What happened? Do I address it? Do I say something? It was like all at once. I'm like, what do I do? What do I say?
well,
How do I?
whatever you do, just don't say break a leg, because that would be completely like, that would completely be offside, you know, at that point.
But then the second time I met him, I was totally cool. And then I told him that story, and he actually even forgot about all of that because he's in such good health now that he was like, I actually forgot about that. You know, I forgot about that. He was an awesome dude too. But again, I just had that starstruck, like, what do I do moment. But luckily it's happened in front of like the nicest people. So I haven't totally embarrassed myself. And
All
if
right,
I have, they were polite about it.
that was I have two things to tell you. One is related to King Diamond. The first ever video we did from King Diamond was actually a Merciful Fate video, and that was the first time my son ever heard King Diamond, right? So at the end of the video I was like, so what do you think? And his answer was, wow, man, he looks like a fucked up Jack the Ripper. That was his, that was his answer. And his wife commented on the video. She said that it was hilarious. And I mentioned it to him, and he thought it was hilarious too. So I felt that connection, even though it was virtually through somebody commenting on the video, and that made my day. That totally made my day. But to go into what you're saying, when you meet somebody, for me, perhaps meeting Max Cavalera, I wouldn't be listening to metal today if it wasn't for Sepultura back then. That's the band. That was my band that really got me into metal. So Max has always been like a huge idol of mine because I remember wanting to buy army pants to cut to make shorts just because he wore them in the first video that I saw, which was Arise. He had those camo army shorts on. So I wanted everything that he would do. Like I was just huge fan. And the first time I met him, I got to go on the bus to do an interview with him. I was so nervous. I think I waited. There was a huge snowstorm. I waited for maybe 7 hours at the venue. I got there really early because I didn't know how long it was going to take me to get there because of the snowstorm. So I didn't want to miss the interview. So I took the day off from work. I got there really early. I waited at a Tim Hortons for 7 hours. I kept ordering coffee and donuts so that they wouldn't kick me out for just loitering around the place. So then as I'm walking to the bus to do that interview, the ice was covering a puddle, and I didn't see the puddle because it looked like it was just like ice. It looked like snow. I stepped, the water went almost all the way up to my knee, right? And I was like,
Yeah.
oh, I was like, fuck, this could not get any worse. Like, I'm just about to go in, and now I'm like soaked. So I go in, I do the interview. Super nice guy. He's like, I've watched your videos with your son. Like, I'm a big fan of you guys and what you do on the channel. And I was like, holy shit, like, it was so surreal. And we got to speak in Portuguese, and he signed my CDs, and we got to talk, and great moment ever. Then as I'm leaving, I step on the puddle, the same puddle again. And then, the MacGyver in me, I was like, I can't go to the venue now with like one leg soaked. It's freezing cold. It was like -30 outside. So I go in the car, I turn on the heat, I take my sock off, and I put the sock on top of where the heat comes off of your car. I put the sock there. I put my shoe facing down there, and I roll up my pants, trying to warm it up and dry it up. What an experience. But it was a great night. So far with Cataclysm, great night.
That's a great story, man. Oh man, I feel like there needs to be a book like Rock and Roll Journalist Blunders, because there's so many stories like this.
Yeah,
We've all had those moments.
And they stay with you forever. And I remember the whole time, as I'm walking in, I'm like, I hope he doesn't notice that I'm wetting the freaking bus, because I'm like, shriek, shriek, shriek. Like every time you walk, there's like water coming out of like your shoe. And I'm like, I mean, like, I want to make a good impression. And here I am with like one pant wet. Like, it was just such a weird moment, but he was such a nice guy. And yeah, I'll never forget that day, and I'll never forget that moment. So yeah, fun times.
Awesome, man. Well, I'm glad I'm not alone in making a fool of myself in front of my idols. So
no, you're definitely not alone. You're definitely not alone. But I think you do it with more grace than me.
maybe. Maybe. I think I get away with it because I have a weird accent, and like I just start talking, and people are like, what is this girl's deal?
No, and I think you're very bubbly, very outgoing. So I think people are willing to give. I think they're going to give you a little bit more of a break than they do a balded beard old dude. You know what I mean? Like, I look weird just to begin with, right? And then you show up like with a wet pants or whatever the case might be. It's just like it takes the whole level of weirdness. Now I look like a hobo at that point. You know what I mean? So it goes from being weird to be super weird, and it's like, what the hell is happening here? So I think you have a lot more to work with than what I do.
Maybe. Then again, I like to think that these people have encountered some of the weirdest things that nothing phases them anymore.
I think you're right. I think they've seen everything. I think they've seen everything.
Yeah, definitely. Because I think of some of the stuff I've seen, and I'm not on the road like these people. I haven't been doing it as long as some of these bands and some of these people in our industry. So I think everyone has just seen some shit, and they're just that jaded. Like, here comes a journalist who looks like a crazy person with water pouring out of his pants. That's cool.
It's hilarious. The last band that I saw during this pandemic, funny enough, was Soulfly. So that's the last show that I went to. And after the show, Max saw me in the crowd, and he came besides the stage to give me a hug, because we hadn't seen each other since that interview. So he came to give me a hug, and the whole Corona thing was already, like, in the news, was kind of already happening, right? And I remember he was really sweaty, right? So in my mind, immediately, I was like, oh, I hope he doesn't have the virus.
Oh, no.
That was like the first thing in my mind, right? And then the second thing was like, fuck it. If I'm going to get sick, might as well be through Max. I don't care. Just hug me anyways. You know what I mean? And then I remember coming home. It's like, you know what? If I get sick, I get sick. Fuck it. I don't care. I'm okay with that. I've made peace with that, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah, my last show that I went to was like literally the Friday before like the travel ban was announced and all the concerts were canceled. That to me was like the day the world ended when that day happened. So it was like literally the Friday before. Coronavirus was like all over the news. All the merch tables had Purell hand sanitizer, and I still smoked a joint with a weed eater. And now looking back, I realize how reckless and irresponsible that was. But at the time, I'm like, it doesn't seem that bad. Like, I still wasn't fully grasping how serious it is. I mean, now I do, but at the time it still wasn't really. I don't know what was wrong with me that I didn't take it serious.
I know up until the last day, me and you were still talking about the Rotting Christ tour, because we were setting up an interview and everything like that. And I was like, Katy, I don't know if I'm going to go. I really want to go, but this virus thing has got me really worried. And then next thing you know, the whole tour got canceled anyway. So it was a moot point. But
Right. Yeah.
but it was really weird because up until that last minute, there was this. You want to go on one hand because it's not happening around you, so you're not really, putting two and two together. It's like, oh, we know there's a virus and whatever, but it was not really too much in the news here. And then suddenly it was just boom, and life was over, and we're down to this.
It's true. Like, I think that's, again, like, it wasn't until everything started getting canceled, and like, I remember too, like, when the first case hit New York, I'm like, oh, it'll be fine. What's the worst that could happen? I just, and then, like, within a week, it was like a pandemic, and it was like tens of thousands of people. I was like, what the hell just happened? Like, I think that's when reality started to click for me. And at the same time, now you have the travel bans, and you have, governments ordering their citizens home, and you have borders closed. It was just, that people, governors and politicians ordering stuff to close, and lockdowns. And it was just, that's when all of a sudden it started to hit me. But before that, it just still didn't feel it. I mean, I just gone to NAM. I just gone to a conference of how many thousands of people. And that was an international thing with people from all over the world, where you're all crammed during flu season, nevertheless, into this like poorly ventilated convention center. You're touching things. It's dirty. They literally say you come home with anthrax because you always get sick. So, like, to me, it still didn't feel like reality that I could go to this. And I was actually there the day that the first case was confirmed in Seattle. So I guess, too, again, it just didn't really, like, click.
Yeah. I'm with you. I'm with you 100%. But hey, we got to make the best out of this crazy world right now. So, and that's why we're doing this through Skype versus doing it at the next time you're coming to Toronto for a show or on a tour or something like that. And
hopefully I'll be there sooner than later. We'll see how this all shakes out. But there is something I have that I'm going to talk to you about planned where I might be coming, but I might not. So it all remains to be seen. This will be sometime in the fall. So hopefully by then, you know.
Let's hope things clear up soon. I'm starting to get at a wit's end, to be honest with you. I'm really starting to lose it. I had stopped drinking for a long time, and I'm back on that wagon. But it is what it is. I'm not even making excuses. I don't care. Life is too short. If I'm gonna die, I'm gonna die laughing. That's kind of like the attitude that I have these days. I just don't give a damn anymore.
Exactly how I feel, man. Like, it's like, what is the point of being alive if you're not going to be living? If you're going to, and it's just, you got to still do what you can to live life, and just
still be careful.
Exactly.
Yeah, still be careful, but don't put yourself in one of those in a cocoon. You know what I mean? Like you still have to do stuff. You know what I mean? Just be careful about it. That's all. Especially if you have a health problem or a health condition, things like that. Then for sure.
Exactly, man. Exactly. And just be responsible for yourself and responsible for the people around you, because you know what? Like, being courteous for one another is also part of what we need to do to really persevere and really get to a good place.
I agree. All right, Katy, thank you very much for your time today. I'm glad you didn't fall asleep before our call. That's amazing. It's amazing. You're never going to live this down.
I know, and I deserve it, man. I know.
But thank you very much for taking the time to chat with me about the business, about your work, everything that you do at Season of Mist. I really appreciate you guys and everything you do for us at the channel by letting us use your music, by letting us review your albums, and being so kind as to set up interviews with all sorts of different bands. I've gotten to meet a lot of my idols thanks to you, so I really appreciate that. And thanks for taking the time today.
Well, thank you as well. I mean, I really appreciate you taking the time to listen, and I appreciate you giving me this opportunity, even though I blew it twice, giving me a third chance.
Third time is a charm. Third time is a charm.
Yeah. And I also definitely just really appreciate everything you've done for the label. I mean, you've been a huge supporter, and it's just been, I'm just as much a fan as yours as you are some of these bands that you interview. So.
All right. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Stay safe and stay healthy.
All right. You too, man.